What's going on, guys? Billy here, and the other day we went over what every single icon, menu, and setting meant within the DJI Fly app, and what I want to do today is go over what I believe are the best settings for the DJI Mavic Mini within the Fly application. Now, I'm not going to walk through what every little single thing means within the app. I'm just going to go over some of the settings I've changed to make the Mavic Mini function the way that I want it to function. If you want to see that full walkthrough, I'll leave a link up in the top corner. I'll also put a link down in the description. It's going to be within my Mavic Mini playlist. But what I want to do today is just show you how I've set up the Mavic Mini to operate how I want it to and what I think are the best settings for this drone. And I'm also going to explain why I think these are the best settings. So let's jump into it. Now, this video is certainly going to be nowhere near as long as that full walkthrough, because in that video we went over every single nook and cranny of all the different pages and all the different menus, but instead in today's video we'll be going over all the different changeable settings so I can show you how I've set up my Mavic Mini and how I think you should set up your Mavic Mini, because in my opinion these are the best DJI Fly settings to make the Mavic Mini perform to its fullest potential. Now, another reason I think this video is going to be fairly short is because this application is fairly stripped down from what we've seen in the past with like the DJI Go application. We don't have as much to change. But anyway, jumping into the app here, this is the main camera feed. I guess this is the main flight view as you're flying the Mavic Mini. And the first thing we can change is some of the camera shooting settings. So here on this page on the right side, just above the red record button where it says 2.7K on my screen, we'll tap on that and we can change our shooting resolution as we're shooting video. I shoot 2.7K. I always shoot the highest resolution that my drone's camera allows me to, because chances are you're further away from your subject. You want to make sure you capture it in a fuller resolution, or a higher resolution. I guess that makes more sense. So for me, in this case, I shoot in 2.7K at 30 frames per second. When it comes to shooting photos, there's not much to change. I never really find myself shooting interval photos, so I shoot the regular single photos, one photo per trigger pull. So we'll move over to video here, and that's pretty much all we've got here on this main screen. Now we'll tap on the three dots in the top right corner to jump into these different menu settings. First up, we have the safety tab. There's three different things we have to change in this menu. First of which is the max altitude, second of which is the max distance, and the third is the auto return to home altitude. So first up, the max altitude. I've got this set to 1,640 feet, and you might be saying to yourself, Billy, you live in the United States, you can't fly over 400 feet, why is this set to 1,640 feet? There's two reasons. First of all, convenience, and second of all is safety. Now, I don't go flying around at 500 or 600 feet as I please, but here in Pennsylvania where I live, there's a lot of changing terrain. So you'll notice right here where I'm looking at, it's actually a hill that goes up, and I can see that there's a lot of different taller structures on that hill. So if I start flying up that way, I'm gonna lose my 400 feet fairly quickly. So once I get to the top of that hill, I might be able to fly at 500 feet because the hill is so tall. So I leave it at 1640 so I have the flexibility to go up or down as I need to. And in terms of safety, how it relates to safety, right? If I get to a structure that's in my way and I need to fly either up or below it, and I want to choose to fly over it so I don't lose signal, I can go above 400 feet if I need to get the drone back to me. I don't have to go and fiddle through the settings, try and change it, and then fly. I can just go up. Now, this does require a little bit more knowledge, or I guess a little bit more awareness, because as you're flying around, you need to make sure you don't go above that 400-foot mark. I can say I've done it a few times by accident. It doesn't have like that limit where it says, hey, you can't go any higher. So if you go and set your limit higher, just make sure you're always aware of your altitude. It's something that I like to do because it gives me a little bit more flexibility. Now, in terms of the max distance, I set this to low limit so that I can fly as far as I need to in order to get the photos and the videos that I want to shoot. Below that, I've got auto return to home altitude. This is a horrible bug. Every single time it reverts back to 49.2 feet. So I like to have this set to like 150 feet, around 150 feet. And this is very situational. So if I'm flying somewhere where there's a lot of taller structures, I'll bump this all the way up to like 300 feet. And again, it doesn't matter what I have it set to here. You need to determine what you want your return to home altitude set depending on where you're flying at. Now, there's really not all that much else to change in this menu set. I guess there's the advanced settings, and from here I like to keep my emergency propeller stop on just in case, because if I do need to stop these motors in midair, and if I have to do it for safety reasons, I can. In payload mode, I leave this turned off because I don't have a payload such as the propeller guards on my drone. All right, so let's move on from these safety advanced settings into the control tab. And I know that this really isn't a changeable setting, but we've got the three different flight modes at the top: Cinesmooth, Position, and Sport mode. I've got to say, Cinesmooth mode is great. I would recommend recommend using it at all times when you're shooting video, depending on if you need to fly fast and try to keep up with something, which you're probably not going to do a whole lot with the Mavic Mini. But if you want to shoot nice, smooth, buttery, cinematic video with this small little drone, Cine Smooth Mode is going to give you the tools that you need to do it. It makes everything so easy to control. And I would say that I go from trying to get a shot in sport mode on my Mavic 2 Pro maybe like 3 or 4 times, but this time I can nail it on my first try every single time because the gimbal movement and the drone movement is just so precise. So go ahead and try out Cine Smooth Mode if you haven't already and you want to shoot really cinematic video. I also just want to go off on a tangent here. If you're shooting photos and you get your drone into a position and you want to dial in the frame very precisely, switch to Cine Smooth Mode. It's going to rotate fairly slowly and you're going to be able to line up your shot very easy. Okay, moving on. We've got our units. This is pretty self-explanatory and also it's definitely a personal preference. So if you prefer the metric system, go ahead and use metric, but if you want to use imperial, which is like feet and miles per hour, switch over to that. That's just your personal preference. Now the gimbal mode, this might be the most important section that I touch on in this whole entire application. So I have mine set to follow mode so that the gimbal stays level with the horizon no matter which way I fly the drone, whereas FPV, the camera will actually bank with the drone as you go like left to right. So set that to follow mode. And then for gimbal, if we jump into advanced, I've got my value set to 15 for pitch speed. I've got my pitch smoothness set to 15 and allow upward gimbal rotation. I've got this turned on. Now the pitch speed is going to determine the speed at which the gimbal looks up and down, right? So I've got mine set to 15. It's fairly slow. So if we jump back here and I pitch the gimbal downwards, this really allows me to dial in my gimbal movements and move it a little bit slower. We'll jump back into the settings here. Pitch smoothness, this is going to change the speed at which the gimbal begins and ends its gimbal pitch movement. So I'll show you a demonstration here. I've got mine set to 15, but if we move this all the way down to 0, you'll notice that it abruptly begins moving down and it abruptly stops as I move the gimbal. Whereas the pitch smoothness, if we set this to say 15, it is going to smoothly go into that movement. So this combined with a slower pitch speed, let me jump back in here, combined with a slower pitch speed is going to give you much better gimbal movements with your drone. I guess that's the best way to describe it. So if you want some really cinematic video, try out these settings. And in terms of the upward gimbal rotation, sometimes I just want to point the gimbal upwards a little bit. So if you look at the degrees over here on the right side, it's set to -6 degrees. If we didn't have that turned on, it would come to a stop at 0 degrees. So this would be as high as we can look up. But with it turned on, we can look all the way up to +20 degrees with the gimbal on this drone. Now, obviously, if you're flying forward and the drone is tilted forwards, the gimbal won't be able to look all the way up 20 degrees. Hopefully my little diagram or whatever helps you here, but I have this turned on so that if I'm trying to shoot photos or videos and I want to pitch that gimbal upwards, I can. We'll center this up here. Jump back into the gimbal settings. If you guys want to, go ahead and take a screenshot of that so you know exactly what those values should be. Let me know what you guys think of that too down in the comment section, because I tell everybody to change their settings to these exact values and a lot of them end up loving them. Now moving on, there's really nothing else to change within the control settings. I guess the remote controller stick mode, I've got mine set to mode 2, and I think that pretty much every single other person has theirs set to mode 2. This is just the default, but if you use something different, I would definitely be interested to know down in the comment section. I've heard that some people would prefer to use like mode 3 because they play video games, and as you're playing like Xbox and you're trying to control the helicopter in a video game, it matches the controls of the video game. So I've heard that before, but I've got mine set to mode 2. Now jumping over into the camera, for my image size, I use 4:3 because this is going to give me the largest image in terms of pixels. If you use 16:9, you just end up cropping out pixels. So if you want to crop down to 16:9, do that in post and crop it like in an editing software. Whereas if you're shooting in 4:3, this will give you all of the pixels that you can shoot rather than just cropping it down. Now, in terms of the advanced settings, first of all, I've got my histogram turned on the main screen here. This is that little box here with the mountains. This is pretty much the easiest way I can explain it. And this shows you your exposure value. So if you want to make sure your image isn't too overexposed or too underexposed, aka too bright or too dark, make sure you turn this on so that you can monitor it. Jumping into the advanced settings again, the grid lines, I've only got my center point turned on, which is that center point right in the middle. And this allows me to make sure that my subject is always in frame. And if I'm trying to orbit around a subject, it's always right in the middle of my shot. I find that all the other grid lines are fairly annoying and they get in the way as I'm just trying to fly my drone, so I don't keep those turned on. Overexposure warning, this is another thing that's fairly annoying. So if we turn this on, you'll see these zebra lines, and that's just getting in the way of me flying. Like, I don't want to see that. I can tell what's already overexposed by seeing what is pretty much pure white. So I leave this turned off. Anti-flicker, I leave it to auto. I'm never usually shooting at nighttime, so there's never usually lights in my shots. Video subtitles turned off. Cache video when recording, I've got that turned off as well. So caching the video is like, as you're shooting, say, photos and videos, it's going to save all of those files in a lower resolution to your device. So in order to save storage on my phone or on my iPad, whatever I'm flying with, I leave this turned off. But also I've noticed that if you've got an older device and you leave this turned on, it can actually slow down your phone or your iPad or whatever you're using. And I usually sometimes will get CPU overloaded warnings. And this was something specifically that was happening with my iPad Mini 4. Now I've got the iPad Mini 5, I've got the iPhone 11 Pro, so there's really no worry of my CPU overloading, but I still leave this turned off to make sure that I don't, I guess, slow the performance down of the device that I'm using. Now, continuing to chug along here, we will move over to the transmission settings. There's one thing to change in here, and that is the channel mode. And a lot of my other videos, I preach that you should just use the automatic channel mode, because out of these different channels we have here, it would be annoying to have to jump back into this menu, change the different channel depending on the interference you're experiencing manually, whereas the drone can just do it automatically for you and choose the best channel for you that doesn't have the most interference. So for me, I leave it set to auto because I let it just change it for me in the background. I'm already worried about flying the drone. I want to make sure it doesn't crash. I want to make sure I get the best photos and videos possible. The last thing I want to worry about is making sure that I'm on the correct channel. So guys, I'm pretty sure that that's all that I've got to go over in terms of the changeable settings within the Mavic Mini DJI Fly application. In the About tab, there's really nothing. This is just about your drone. You can change the name, the model, the aircraft firmware. You can go over everything about your drone, obviously. But yeah, so that's how I set up my Mavic Mini in order to get it to perform to its fullest potential. There's usually a lot more to go over with like a Mavic Air or a Mavic Pro 2, just because you're going to be going through the DJI Go application and you have so much more customization. And look, I'm going to tell you guys right now that this is still an early version for the firmware of the Mavic Mini and an early version of the DJI Fly application. So I hope that this video becomes outdated and I need to make a new one in a couple of months because they've added so many different features. Because as of right now, I guess as they're saying it, this ain't it, chief. There's just not a lot to change. And I understand that it's usually for people who are just getting into the drone scene and they don't want something that's too overly complicated. But still, they really do need to give us some more customization within this application. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Hopefully this helped you out. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.